Hello, recording. So do I have Simply Brick on the line?
Yes, you do.
Great. So is it both Corrina and Ariel?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Joe, glad that you took the time to come onto our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So you're a Canadian alt rock band.
Yes.
You were formed in June 2020.
Yes.
So you're currently working on your first. So this is a little different than we usually have bands that might have some stuff they talk about, but you guys are currently working on your material. So probably focus on the questions I sent you about how you got into music and how you guys met.
Yeah, that's good. Sure.
So the first question I usually ask bands are like, when did they first get into music and at what age? Whoever wants to go first with that, let me know.
I like when I was small, I've always wanted to play guitar, and I got my first guitar when I was about 9, and then I took some lessons, and then afterwards I let it down for a bit, and when I was 15 I started again, and I continued. This day I just kept on playing, and yeah.
So
And
I guess when you started playing guitar, like were your goal was to write your own music, or was it to be like create like a cover band, or just learn how to play it? Did you immediately start like writing your own music, or just trying to learn it?
well, I started joining a band actually when I was about, I would say 26. That's my first band, because I was always playing like alone, and like playing like in my room, and like playing all the time. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'd like to perform, because when I was in university, I had a friend who was in a band, and I was like, I could do that too. I've always wanted to be in a band. So I found my previous band, and they were more of a very different style than what I'm doing now, and it was a nice experience. And I was with that band. It was original songs as well. And then afterwards I just wanted to branch out and do different types. I guess you could say like my first love, like my first, like what I'm more drawn to musically, which is more, I would say, like dreamy sounds and softer rock, and more, embellishments, and kind of ethereal sounds.
Like a dream
And
pop
that's how,
type of thing.
yeah, precisely, exactly. So that's how I found that love. I wanted to do that, and then I met Corrina in the music scene, and then she plays the bass and I play the guitar, and we both have a very mutual, similar love to similar music, and we just decided to form our own project together, and here we are.
So Corrina, how did you start in the bass?
Actually, I played drums initially. I was playing drums in my high school band, and in Sec 5, so I was 16. My brother joined that same class as me, and he was the better drummer. My brother also plays music. So I let him play, and the only instrument left was the bass. So basically, I was stuck with it. But it turns out that I really loved it, and ever since then, I've been playing it, and it's my favorite instrument. It's a lot of fun.
I've talked, and it seems like sometimes there could be on this to be very. There's a lot of people that were guitar players that suddenly get put in because people who are bass players, they have a tendency to play other things. This and that's actually been a common.
So you're cutting out just a little bit. I'm not sure if maybe it's my connection
Did you hear what I said? It was like a common theme that a lot of people. Yeah.
Oh,
do you hear
yes,
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear you now. It's better.
Like a lot of bass players seem to have come from playing other instruments, and then in the bands they're in, they kind of need somebody to take it, and they took it. that they actually
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, most bassists that I know used to be
Yeah,
guitarists.
it
So
seems like if they have too many guitarists, somebody's got to switch to the bass or a keyboard or something.
yeah, exactly.
So what about the bass? Since I'm a musician myself, I'm a keyboardist, and I started actually on clarinet and sax, and then I said, well, I can't really write songs on clarinet and sax. Not, I mean, if you're in a jazz band, you could, but like if you're gonna write a pop song, write a music, usually you need a guitar or a keyboard. So what do you the way the maybe you can describe what you like about playing bass. I have some ideas about when I've talked to bass players, but I'd like your kind of take on it.
Well, I don't actually like slap or anything. I'm more of a melodic bass player, I guess you would say. Like I play chords and higher up on the neck, and I don't know, it's just I find it's for me it's easier than guitar because I find the guitar is just too small and I can't 6 strings, is too much. I can't make chords on that. Bass, it's nice and spread out, and I don't know, it sounds different to me. Like I find guitar is so popular, and like it's such a beautiful instrument, obviously, but
So do you like the rhythmic nature of how you have to tie to the drummer?
yeah, I could be more.
So I've
I
talked
just like
about,
it, and it's easier for me to
do
play
you
on.
like the idea of being kind of in the rhythm section of the band, like being tied to the drummer?
Hello?
Yeah. Do you hear me? Hi.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just gonna check my Wi-Fi, but I
Yeah, I
haven't
can.
really. I'm not sure why it would do that.
Yeah, I mean, usually it shouldn't do that. I mean, I do a lot of these, but it kind of is dependent on if there's a good bandwidth or too many people are on the Wi-Fi or something. But normally it doesn't have a problem. But make sure
Hold on. What we're gonna do? Just give us just a moment. We're just gonna go somewhere else. Okay? Just give us a minute. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I still hear you.
Can you hear us now?
I still hear you.
Okay, hold on. We're just gonna go. We're just gonna go over here.
I still hear you.
Oh, here now it's much better. Is your mom in there? Oh, okay. All right, we're going in a different room.
Wherever you can be closer to your router, as long as it's not getting.
Oh, okay. Here it's much
If it's
better.
not getting cut off from the router, then sometimes if you're around walls or something, the signal doesn't go through. But
all right, perfect. Well, we could hear you very well now.
I think we were talking.
Sorry
That's no
about that.
problem. I think we were talking about how bass players kind of come from maybe they were guitar players or maybe they were. And what I was asking about playing bass is, do you like being in the rhythm section of the band? In terms of being locked in with your drummer. Though I know you're looking for a drummer, but usually the relationship between a drummer and the bass player is pretty tight in the song.
I love it.
In the song.
Yeah, definitely have to have a good drummer and definitely have to be locked in. That's the most important part.
Yeah, and I think it's cool about being a bass player because, like, as a keyboard player, my bass hand kind of, does what you do on a bass. So, like, and I have like modes and stuff. So when I play with drummers, I kind of lock in like a bass player,
Yeah, of course.
And I can have that same kind of relationship that you have as a bass player. So I get it, and it's cool. But so let me get back into some of the other questions I like to ask. So a lot of times, you guys realized you had a talent for music, and you started writing your own music. You were in bands, but who are your influences specifically? If you're willing to kind of tell us who they are, each of you, like in terms of your musical heroes or influences, people that you kind of made you want to be a musician.
Well, my number one musical hero, it would have to be John Frusciante. I love his style of the way he plays the guitar, and sometimes it's just he doesn't use complexities of embellishments or things like that. Sometimes it's just like these spaced out notes, and it's just the way that he plays it is just so beautifully played, and he is like my inspiration. Like I love a lot of his solo work as well, and the way that he plays is just, it mesmerizes me. And I love his tone as well, like his guitar tone and his sound, let alone his playing.
That's your primary influence in terms of like you're very inspired by his playing.
Precisely.
That's interesting. So, any other influences for you guys?
I would have to say I'm also influenced by I like a lot of
Shoegaze.
yeah, shoegaze bands. Yes, sorry.
Shoegaze. Oh,
yeah,
that, yeah,
like
yeah.
and there's and it, like what kind of gave me inspiration for like as well for this band is like also like the old shoegaze bands as well, like Bloody Valentine or bands like Winter and bands like Boy Pablo and as well as
What about a band like Car Seat Headrest?
that I've never actually heard of that band.
They're kind of like the
Oh yeah, Mac DeMarco, I like as well. I like Mac DeMarco as well.
Yeah. They're not as well known as they could be, but they had this famous album like Mirror to Mirror from 2011 that was kind of this big kind of.
I'll definitely look into that. That sounds interesting. As well as like there was the Cocteau Twins, bands like that, bands like that from the 80s and 90s that kind of departed that kind of style of using that kind of dreamy aspect in their playing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm into progressive rock as a keyboardist, but I was very much influenced by the Velvet Underground, like Lou Reed and the Velvets, which are kind of like the root of all like alternative music. Kind of, you can go back to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground.
Oh, of course, Lou Reed's a great artist. And also, I wanted to mention that just brought it to my mind. Like I like jazz a lot as well.
Oh, cool.
Like sometimes using like some I like using jazz chords in my playing, and I love like jazz guitarists as well, like Wes Montgomery and the different styles of playing that jazz musicians have as well.
That's a big draw for me. And like me as an African American artist, I've been drawn to like Coltrane and Davis, and
of course, Miles Coltrane
and like Sun Ra, which is a more rare. They're kind of like Sun Ra is like the Velvet Underground of jazz. They were like a bebop band in the 50s that suddenly in the 70s started doing in the late 60s and 70s, they started doing something that sounded kind of like Funkadelic before Funkadelic. They actually dressed up in like space costumes and they were a bebop jazz band, but they went on stage with capes and space costumes looking like Parliament Funkadelic in the late 50s. And actually Parliament Funkadelic kind of took their kind of space kind of motif from them.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. They're very creative, and actually funk too is really nice as well. And Corrina's actually very, very like influenced by funk as well in her playing.
Oh, yeah, I love like Bootsy Collins and the whole Parliament Funkadelic vibe.
Oh yeah, Parliament's a great funk band.
Yeah,
they kind of like created hip hop. Everybody samples them. Like most of hip hop is actually sampled Parliament Funkadelic records.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Most of the core hip hop when hip hop started, most of the bands heavily sampled Bernie Worrell and Bootsy Collins and George Clinton's music. If you go back and listen to Funkadelic albums and you listen to early hip hop, they used the MPCs, like their Kai MPCs, and they sampled tons of Funkadelic records. I mean, almost all, they were very heavily layered, and they took lots of different like small clips, but they took them from like all their big hits in the 70s, which a lot of kids probably didn't know, so they thought it was original, but it's all kind of taken from there, which is the DNA. Like it's all James Brown, it's all funk, it's that style, but it's interesting. I mean, I think that's a foundational thing for most music today, between like jazz and funk. There's a lot of
the thing, like blues and jazz, like that's what a lot of people don't realize is that that's the foundation of all, like a lot of music that we listen to today, as well as rock and everything that's popular today or what became huge. And that's what people don't realize. And that's the source. Blues and jazz and funk as well evolved out of that. And that's the beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, being an African American artist, I kind of would have that in my DNA, kind of handed down. But it's just interesting that a lot of people think rock and roll is like it's kind of like, oh, it's a Led Zeppelin game, it's an
No,
Aerosmith game. It's like it came from Lead Belly and Robert Johnson and Bo Diddley and all.
precisely. Yeah, I totally
Yeah,
agree with you. They're like the originators, even like Chuck Berry at the time. And,
yeah. I mean,
the actual, in Louisiana when they'd have like, what's that, like right before jazz started, there was forgive me, I forget the genre, but it was that, what was that name
yeah,
of it? It was a genre that happened. It was right before jazz.
yeah. There's a pre-jazz age.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's all that is the originators, and a lot of people tend to forget that, and it's important to be underlined.
I mean, like Jimi Hendrix to me, like he's the originator of modern guitar, hero type stuff, and no one had ever approached it that way. You had what Lead Belly and Robert Johnson was doing, but Hendrix kind of took this idea of taking this cosmic, stuff that later, I mean, Miles Davis took the same kind of idea with fusion. Is you take jazz and you mix like cosmic psychedelic aspects, and you take rock aspects and you kind of fuse it with funk and jazz and rock, and that's how you get like the Jimi Hendrix experience is this kind of fusion of multiple styles.
Well, that's the thing. Actually, it reminds me as well. Is like our project is also a fusion of like alternative rock and dreamy shoegaze. It's a perfect fusion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we're almost, I wouldn't say like maybe starting our own genre, but I mean it's pretty unique in itself. So you remind me of fusion and stuff, and I'm like, well, we have an alternative side that kind of like a more of a raw bit rock, but it's not necessarily hard, or it's not punk, or it's like this slight kind of, I would say, punchier side. And then there's a layer that comes and meets it. It's like a synergy of like this dreamy, shimmery kind of effects, with the effects that we use, and a little bit of softness, and which.
Well, you make me want to hear it. You make me want to hear your songs. I gotta wait till 2021.
Well, actually, on our Instagram, we do have a very short clip of like.
Yeah, I heard short clips, but I was kind of like, oh, I want to hear more.
Exactly.
soon.
So I mean, I understand.
Soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear your dream pop kind of vibe. I hear that shoegaze. Like I said, there's that car seat headrest has, maybe you don't know them, but you have some sounds like them. They have an album like Mirror to Mirror from 2011, Face to Face in 2016. You have some sounds that reminded me of those albums.
Mm-hmm.
I think today a lot of people are doing, like a lot of artists that I really like to listen to are the people who are merging genres, that are kind of breaking molds and actually combining genres. And that's where the real interesting music is. That's why I talk to singer-songwriters like at this level in the industry, people who are just breaking in, or small independent artists that I think need to have exposure. It's cool that I'm actually getting you guys like right at the beginning. Like some bands I get like in the mid stage or maybe a little further on, but it's cool that actually I'm catching you guys even before you have your first single, which is cool because I like to have bands come on and actually talk about their music when they release a record. So once you start releasing, we definitely can have you on. And not we're closing, but I just like to explain the whole reason why I do this, and now I can kind of watch you guys grow.
Wow, yeah, we appreciate that. It's very genuine from your part. That's really a nice way of really getting to the source and the root of like the emergence of musicians, or I would say a project, before it actually hits the highway. It's like the car is just starting, and that's how you're just getting it at the originators. The flower is just blooming. It's not even grown yet, and that's really beautiful in a way.
So I guess like when you guys write, this is a big thing today because I kind of, just to give a little bit, I write very organically. I use analog synthesizers. I use Moogs and old Rolands and Prophets and like Hammond B3s and pianos. And I like to record. I'm a DAW-less recorder. I'm an electronic musician, but I don't use a DAW. I use hardware recorders because I like to kind of capture things kind of in an old school way. I'm kind of showing my age. I'm in my 50s. And when I first started, when I was like 17 and stuff, I was using Fostex and like Tascam 4-track and 8-track recorders. Because this is before they had DAWs. And I just felt I like being able to control my recording in that way. And maybe it's harder because you're not on the grid, but I just like that kind of organic feel of this. Okay, I actually have to learn the song. I just don't go on the grid and fix it.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So how do you guys record? And now that I kind of said, I'm not into DAW, but do you guys use a DAW, or do you use hardware, or do you go in the studio? How do you guys put songs together?
Well, for the singles that we're going to be releasing, we worked with a friend of mine, and we recorded in this like warehouse space, but it was like he had proper equipment, so I guess you could call it kind of a studio, like an indie studio, I guess,
Cool.
And we recorded drum and bass together, and then guitar over that. And I still have to do my vocals actually, because of COVID. We haven't really gotten around to it, but soon.
So you guys are physically using a studio to record, so you're not going on to like Pro Tools and putting stuff down and then bringing it to the studio. You're actually doing it in the studio.
Yeah, we're doing it in the studio.
Yeah, so that's kind of old school. That's kind of like the analog, because like so many people today, they're getting their MacBook or something, and they go get Pro Tools or they go get Logic. They set it up with all their stuff, and a lot of times they're using MIDI keyboards. And I'm a keyboard player, so I'm a kind of purist. Like if I'm going to use a Hammond organ, I'm actually using a Hammond organ. If I'm using a Moog, I'm not using a plugin. I'm actually using a Moog. I think something gets lost sometimes if you don't actually play the instrument. And you guys play, bass and guitar, so you understand that you're actually playing instruments. So what's your kind of feel? Because you guys are kind of an old school, like rock. A lot of rock people in rock music say, well, the rock style is kind of going away, and the DJ's becoming prominent, and the producers becoming prominent. But you're still actually playing instruments.
Yeah, of course.
I find it's like a very I find it's like what I find very beautiful is that like when a person is playing an instrument, whether it be guitar, bass, or drums, whatever, it's like you're really channeling in the most purest way, like the feelings that you have onto the instrument. And I find that just very, very beautiful. And it's like kind of like what you mentioned, it's a form, like I would say it's like so close and so, I guess you could say it's a channel that's so close compared to if you just use a computer program. Not to say that it's not art, like using like, the way that the DJs are or whatever. It's still beauty itself.
Yeah. You can get to very complex stuff. Like when I looked at like the original, guys that used MPCs, which is a way of doing samples, right? There's a lot of brilliance in some of those producers, how they layered those, right? And so when you're getting into complex hip hop and taking clips and stuff, as a producer, you can be as artistic as a painter, a sound painter, because if you've got the skill set, you kind of know what to put together, like the Dr. Dre's of the world that knew how to layer things and had a feel for it. And so DJs they actually can become producers. I saw a documentary on Amy Winehouse and Back to Black. And the Back to Black album, one of the producers was a DJ that became a producer. And because he was a DJ, he kind of knew what works. Right. Mm-hmm. So he actually got beyond the DJ and he got into working with, full bands. But he had the sense, because he was a DJ, what the hooks. Mm-hmm. So he knew when he was with the physical bands, he knew how to get them to get into the hooks, and he actually used acoustic bands and real drummers and stuff, but he had this kind of capability. So I'm not that I'm denigrating DJs, but I think this guy who was a DJ did have the respect for people who actually play it. And I think it's kind of like both ways. In some ways, I can use samples, I can use modern digital synths, but I have a preference for the more organic organs and older analog synths from the 70s and 80s, just because they have character, And it's like the kind of character why you pick one guitar over another, or a bass over, or you pick an amp.
It's like a fingerprint, essentially. It has its own kind of essence that you'll never be able to replicate, either would be with a computer or whatever it may be, because it's just so genuine.
Yeah, you guys pick your guitars. I always talk to guitar players, and they always pick their guitars, they pick their pickups, they pick their necks, they pick it because of the tone, right? like a keyboard player, like you might buy a 74 Moog and you're looking for it because you know it has a certain sound that the Moog from 78 or a Moog from 68 doesn't have. And so you go searching for it because it has that tone. So I totally get it. Like, and some people didn't realize that, like, keyboards, at least the older ones, have that character. And so you kind of search for them because you're looking for that tone.
Yeah.
But do you guys use particular instruments? I do like to kind of get into the details. Like, so for your guitars and basses, do you have preferences for the sound you're trying to get? Because you're doing the shoegaze, dream pop. Is there a certain type of guitar or bass that you use, or you just use the effects to kind of get what you want?
Well, I always use a jazz bass. I like a very warm tone when I play. But, you know, a little bit of punch too, because you want to cut through the mix or else no one's going to hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, ever since I started playing, I've always used jazz basses, and I just prefer them. They have a small neck, you know, they sound really nice. And
on the bass, do you sometimes feel that the recording engineers and producers sometimes try to hide the bass? Or do they, you know, in certain types of music, bass is like elevated. In other types of music, sometimes it's like pushed down. Do you end up having to like fight with the producer or the person to say, you know, I really want to hear that?
Usually, I don't have to fight for it. But one thing I have noticed is that sometimes they try to put on like a fuzz on my bass, which I can't stand that sound. I find it sounds like farts, to be honest. There's like a thick fuzz on a bass, so
yeah. Well, sometimes people try to get basses to sound more guitar-like. You know, it's funny. Like John Entwistle from the Who, sometimes his bass could carry like it was playing chords. You know,
that's cool. I like that.
He used that, and it would actually distort as much as Townsend's guitar. And in some cases, like when he played Bob O'Reilly live, that Entwistle was actually playing like chords on his like 5-string bass, and it was like coming in like guitar chords, which it like kind of let Pete do additional guitar chords. And so it was interesting stuff that you could do. But yeah, I can see why in some cases you fuzz out your bass, but if in other places you want to hear it, you know. But yeah, it's interesting because I was watching another documentary on Metallica, and when they got their new bass player after their bass player kind of tragically died in an accident, the first album he was on, they like made it so you couldn't even hear him.
Oh yes, I heard about that.
And he was like,
that's awful.
Yeah, he was kind of like, he was trying to fight for it, but he was the new guy in the band, and he was kind of like, oh, I guess I got to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know,
that sucks. You need bass, at least some bass. Like with no bass, there's no feel. Like, there's nothing there.
I feel like the bass is like the heart of a song. Like it's like I would say like the foundation. And that's another thing with our project is that I always tell Corrina, like because she also does a lot of bass solos and very groovy, like very nice. It really grabs your attention.
Mm-hmm.
One of those like very melodic solos, and I like to put a spotlight on that, because often it's like, yes, like the guitar in a band or in a project or whatever, it's like often like always like the one with the spotlight, but I like to as equally put the spotlight onto the bass playing, and that's what I voiced in our project is I like. And you'll notice in my first single, Corrina does a very, very like it really grabs your attention. This solo is just it's very good.
That's
I'm trying
awesome.
to find another word to say good because it really blows me away.
One thing I liked about like the new romantic or the new wave era, if you go back and listen to new wave, there's a lot of groove in it. They actually, the bass players in the new wave era, they ended up doing a lot of groove kind of bass stuff. They kind of came out of Motown and you know, the idea of doing that, but then kind of doing it with this kind of synth pop stuff. But it did have a lot of funk bass in it. You know, there's a lot of people were emulating the funk era in new wave, but then adding synths to it, and there was a lot of groove oriented stuff. And I think some bands, you know, when you get to the grunge movement or you get into like other types of like heavy, you know, like death metal and really heavy metal, sometimes the bass gets pushed down. But in more pop oriented or other types of genres where you allow like the tones to be heard in the mix. If you let the bass tone be heard, you think a band like Steely Dan, you hear the bass, you hear everything. Like, it's more jazz oriented because they had tons of Motown playing on those songs. So you actually had Motown drummers playing on most of the Steely Dan albums. Those guys play musicians and jazz guys, and all those records are very layered, and you hear like everything. And so that's kind of like my kind of tradition has come from bands like Yes and Genesis and Steely Dan's of the world, where you actually have a lot of complexity, and you hear the notes and you hear the guitars, and things don't get washed over. But then not that I don't get into like that kind of alternative drone stuff, which I can get into with Joy Divisions of the world and stuff like that. But I like pretty much everything. I listen to anything, but I think it's cool, like you're saying, that you can actually articulate your bass and people hear it, and it's not drowned out. That's a cool thing.
Yeah. Well,
exactly. It's like there's so much variation and so much to take from all different genres that there's just like, because it's combinations. It's just there's so many, and it's just it's something to appreciate it.
So you guys are working on your first single. Is this part of a bigger project where you're planning to do like an EP or an album?
I think for now we're gonna release multiple singles throughout the year.
That sounds like that's most people today because of the way the Spotify playlists work.
Yeah, exactly. I think releasing an EP or an album would probably be a waste of money at this point. So singles are the way to go.
But eventually, if your plans work out and you get a good reaction, would you think of collecting like your band was into it like an EP?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
And so because of COVID, I've been talking to a lot of bands that coming up with different approaches to deal with COVID, where they're doing online shows, they're collaborating with other artists. You just started, so you're just trying to get your own footing. But in terms of presenting to your audience, are you guys just looking forward to actually, things opening up in 2021 and going the traditional route of playing shows? Are you having a plan to like do videos on YouTube or live performances? What's your kind of overall plan?
Well, we'll definitely release some videos, definitely a music video with the first single. For the performances, we'd like to do the traditional route of going to bars, playing around the city, going maybe to Toronto or cities close by. And yeah, I prefer that to streaming because we don't really have enough good equipment, at least right now, to properly stream it. Like, it probably wouldn't sound that good, so I think a bar would be the better option.
Yeah, I think as you start, it just seems like, well, I don't know. It looks like because of the vaccine, things are going to be in a better position in 2021. And it does take some equipment to get that sound, especially like if you're like me, I'm a keyboard-based band, so a lot of my stuff is already like electronic in some way, even if it's analog. So I do a lot of Instagram streaming from my home studio and Twitch and YouTube. I've actually invested in the cameras and all the stuff that lets me send my soundboard out. But, it's something I invested in like a couple of years ago. So I already had it. It is something that it takes a little bit to build up. And a lot of bands were focused on doing, having their amps and having their stuff for playing live shows. And so, but just now that things have shifted, a couple of bands I've talked to in the last 6 months have started to invest in, that infrastructure to actually have a green screen, have the cameras, run a show, just because it's been getting so hard, they weren't getting any way of getting out to the public. But do you feel like where you are, you guys are going to be in a better position in 2021 to actually play live?
I mean, we're going to need to find a drummer first, and we can't do that right now, obviously, because of COVID. So first that, and then hopefully, if things get better, we'll be able to play in bars by the end of 2021, or maybe this summer, a bit hopeful for that. We'll see what happens.
And we look on the bright side of things, like with COVID, like this gives us a chance actually to really work on our songs and finish all the canvas on a lot of ideas that we have. and kind of put them together and perfect them. And so we kind of look on the bright side of things, and so we work on that, and just finishing as many songs as we can and stuff like that. And then when the shows come, we're just gonna perform what we've worked on, essentially. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise, this COVID thing, because it gives a chance to really delve into the creative part. I mean, the writing process
The bands
more.
much time getting to a year. They had, in order to make money in this industry, you have to tour. You make more money touring than you do selling or streaming. So a lot of bands would end up writing on the road. They're on their in their Econoline van, or if they're bigger, they're in their bus and they're writing on the road. After a sound check, all this stuff, and say, hey, that's the new stuff. But now you actually, like you said, a lot of the bands I've talked to have indicated that this is the first time they actually have a clear space to actually come up with like a cohesive idea, where they could sit down and actually come up with something maybe more considered than they ever thought they could. Because a lot of bands are kind of stuck on that treadmill, like, okay, I'm going to tour and I'm going to do the album and tour and do the album. And they don't give themselves a lot of time to actually write the album. So yeah, I think that is a cool thing, and I've taken advantage of it myself. So you guys feel that is a good use of your time, that you've been putting a lot into your craft?
Yeah, of course. And I'm also it works well for me too, because I'm new to singing and I've never sang live, and I'm honestly like very scared to do that. So I have more time to practice until then.
Yeah, that's always the hard thing, is I was a keyboard player. I never sang for the first part of my career. I didn't have to. I was just playing keyboards, and there was always lead singers and stuff. And then I said, well, you know what? If you're ever going to do anything in this industry, you have to kind of sing. Can I try to put out? Then I had to figure out, okay, well, I got to go. And then I had to go to New York. I went to Boston. I did shows, and I finally started to get my legs. It's just kind of like going into a club in New York and Brooklyn will give you legs. Because New York audience is like they get out of here or you're here.
Oh man! Wow.
And you learn how to deal with the crowd and how to do what you need to do. But yeah, live is something. Even if they try to live stream, the one thing that's really kind of hard to deal with is you don't have that interaction from the crowd. A lot of musicians, we kind of feed off the crowd, and if you're trying to play live and you don't get any feedback because you're just in your room, or you're in a garage, or you're in your basement studio, you don't get that feedback from the crowd. And I think most musicians kind of need that feedback to kind of do their performance.
Yeah, the feedback is good, and well, unless it's a bad feedback, in which
Well, yeah,
case,
yeah. I mean, if you get a bad crowd that they hate you, then that's not going to make you feel good. But but it's like most if past that, I think a lot of with music is, you don't technically have to be the best singer or the best player, but if you have something that feels true, right? If you have something that's honest, come out there and you pour your heart with the best of your vision. A lot of people appreciate that, and they get it. I think that's the whole thing with that kind of old music scenes. Listen to bands that maybe they're not, Mariah Carey, they're not Whitney Houston. Nico, she was a model, Germanic kind of drone voice, but it worked. So the idea that pitch perfect voice, but his poetry is unbelievable. So I think people, if you're honest and you believe in what you're doing, and the crowd picks up on that, I think that's how you can get over.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to be perfect. You're always going to make mistakes. Even if you are the best, you're still going to make mistakes. So you have to accept that, and it's definitely more about the feel and the soul you put into it, and yeah, that's all. You just gotta hope for the best, hope people enjoy it, and I think if you put a lot of work and effort and you really love what you're doing, then hopefully it
So
works out.
Simply Brick, why did you guys come? What's the name? The name for the band? Is this the feeling you guys came up with, or how did that come about?
Um, I joined a band back in like 2014. It was my first band. We didn't have a name, so when we played our first live show, we asked the crowd, like, throw some names at us. We need some ideas. And then one kid, I think, said the Bricks or something like along those lines, or like brick or something. And then I was kind of into the name, I was like, oh, well, what about that name? And then my drummer was like, what about Simply Brick? And ever since then, that name has stuck with me for like 6 years. And I've always wanted to use it, and now I finally can.
Oh, so you got that. That's how. What's interesting? Every band's story, how they get their name. I like to make sure I ask because every story is different. It's just kind of cool, If you go into rock history, like the famous one, like Keith Moon actually gave Led Zeppelin their name because he was gonna. They asked him if he wanted to join Led Zeppelin, and he said, "Well, that would go down like a lead Zeppelin."
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
and that's how they got their name. But like, there's famous stories about how bands get their name. But yeah, it's always interesting to hear, how musicians figure that out. Sometimes it takes longer, and sometimes this happens.
Well, the band started with the name. Before anything else, it was the name.
So I guess during auditions, I guess it's hard for drummers to try to do auditions without being face to face, right? There's no way for you guys to really get a drummer without face to face, like real live auditions, right?
Definitely need to do it live audition. I mean, you could do it over Skype or something, but it's just not the same. And you definitely want to meet the person, because even if he's the
You want to
best,
get the
but like
vibe.
maybe he's yeah, maybe he's not a very nice person. I'd rather someone not as good and just like really chill and nice and willing to like work on the stuff with. Like, I want someone who will write with us
Oh
too,
yeah, the chemistry
because
of
I
a
like.
band is super important,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
like Beatles, end up having Ringo is because he had such a better chemistry than their first drummer. you it's like it just and it's like every band kind of comes into who they're gonna have as their band, and it's really important to that connection, that everybody's on that team. I mean, a lot of bands end up kind of blowing out because maybe they didn't assess that right. But you never know. But like, yeah, it's kind of a hard thing. Like you have so many different personalities. The bigger the band, the more personalities, the harder to manage. Well, you guys are always going for like a 3-person unit.
Definitely a 3-piece.
Yeah, it's a lesson. You get the 4 and 5-piece bands, then you start having a lot of problems.
Oh yeah, and it's hard to get together at that point too, with all the different schedules and all
that. Involved,
Yeah.
Bands like the Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers, so many members, and everybody started fighting. And just because it's like everybody gets their personalities involved, and suddenly, who's the alpha, who's not the alpha, who's doing this, who's doing that, and you kind of got to get into this thing. I remember REM said that the reason they stayed together, they just said no matter who was writing the song, everybody's getting 25, 25, 25, 25. Everybody split 4 ways.
That's the way it should be.
And then you get a band like the Eagles, where Don Henley and Glenn Frey basically said, "Well, we're in wars." So,
well, I think it should be equal with the equal split for everything, unless someone's really just kind of not doing anything at all.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's bad situation if you get into like the Eagle situation where people were like work for hire, and then you had you have like been a situation where Ace and some of some of the founding members, after a couple of years, they were out of the band, they came back in the band, and suddenly they made them employees, and they weren't founding members. You got paid like these like workers instead of being founding members. And I think it's a bad dynamic. When if you do that, then it's a bad.
It becomes more like a job at that point, and I don't know. It's like I find that as long as everything's like equal amongst all members, and I personally find the less members you are, the better it is. And obviously, I think you need to have a very good connection with the person to be able to voice what you like, what you don't like, how to help each other out and all that kind of stuff. And when it becomes like 4 or 5, 6, even, like that just becomes, there's way too many people. There's way too different, like the way the connections just don't align because there's so many different people.
Yeah, this phrase, it ends up fraying apart because it's hard to manage that,
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes you have 2 people teaming up against the other 2, and it just becomes kind of a free-for-all. That's why smaller units is, I find, better for us.
I think it works in funk and jazz more just because a lot of funk and jazz players seem to just want to play. And they just want the opportunity to get out on stage and actually do it. And they're like, they'll just sign the paper, and maybe that's bad because they don't pay attention to what they're doing. But it's like, I just want to get on stage. I just want to, I just want to get out there and be playing in New Orleans or playing, at the club, or on the tour circuit. And a lot of, that was the one big problem with a lot of kind of soul and jazz musicians is, and even Motown musicians, they didn't really read what they were signing. And they just wanted in front of crowds. And so they kind of let the industry mess them up. But, a lot of it is because musicians tend to like, if you give me a place to play, I'm going to go, and I'm going to do it. And it's kind of like, you always have to kind of take care of yourself. And I think that's cool today in the modern independent music. A lot of musicians where you have to be mindful of those kind of horror stories and realize that you need to protect yourself in terms of like your contracts and your masters and your ownership of your music. Are you guys like being independent? Are you into that kind of ethic of like, I'm writing this, I own it, I'm going to go the way I want to go. I don't want to just be having them tell me they want me to be the next 10 star.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to go that way. Like, I want to write my own stuff. I don't want someone telling me what I can play and how I can play it. So definitely independence the way to go, I think.
Production. Well, they're looking for, they actually look for top lines, or they look for producers. They look for everything you write or it's coming from like your heart. It's coming from you, right? You guys aren't like looking for other people to write your music. You're writing your own music, right?
I mean, collaborations are nice sometimes. Like my brother sometimes, he has input on the things I write, or sometimes I have a lot of musician friends. So, I'll be like, oh, what do you think of this? Or do you have any ideas for this? But like 90% of it is coming from us.
Well, it sounds like you're still doing it. You're not like one of these like kind of production shops that's producing like, like cloning beats.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It sounds like you guys are like a traditional, like, back in the day, we used to call it like college radio. College radio was like the scene, when I was growing up, like where you heard like REM or Camper Van Beethoven or Husker Du or The Clash. You heard them on a UMass college radio station, from University of Massachusetts or it's like, Boston College, or you heard some, NPR radio station at night was playing all the stuff they wouldn't hear on the radio. And that kind of got me into music because I was like, that's where I heard all this, Replacements and, the Sex Pistols and Television, all those bands. Like, to me, it's like they weren't super big, but they were very kind of inspirational because they wrote their own music and they weren't trying to be the latest thing, but they seemed to be really honest, and that's what I like in music, when people are coming from that kind of honesty.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the thing, like, we're going to aim also to play at the college radio, like, the McGill, CKUT. If we could in the States, want to send our stuff to KEXP or
Yeah.
K. yeah, that station, like, you know, we have a list of like college radio stations that we'd like to send our stuff over. And, you know, we just want people to enjoy it as much as we do, just to.
That's the right approach, because that's really the scene, you know, other than, you know, because, you know, some of the social, more hip hop, DJ, and those college radio stations are still supporting like alternative types of rock, indie rock, you know, and alternative rock and shoegaze and stuff you guys are doing is still kind of in the radio space. And even the satellite radio space has places for it, but the traditional radio is kind of where I like to go, because you'll get, you know, get the young DJs or even older DJs are willing to try new bands. You know, that's what I'm always looking for. I don't want to keep on hearing, you know, I love Tom Petty, I love Led Zepp, I love Heart, but I don't want to hear that all day. You know, I want to hear something.
Exactly.
I want to hear something new.
Precisely. It's the most important thing.
Yeah, American radio in some places has gotten so tired. I mean, I keep on hearing the same songs that I heard in like '84. You know, they're still playing.
Well, that's it. That's why it's like good to have a variety, and that's why, like we were mentioning earlier, the fusion of different genres, just kind of like what we're doing, is going to be a breath of fresh air for people. It's going to be the first time listening to our music, because it's not something that you hear every day.
Yeah, I think what I heard that was very encouraging. That one thing under COVID is a lot of people are listening to more new bands than ever. That I heard some statistics that people are willing to try new music just because they probably have more time to do it. And so there's a lot of people actually, there's an opportunity for a lot of new bands right now.
It's definitely a good time to release music, I think. And even just like posting online, people are more on their phones, you know, people are bored, you can't go out, nothing to do, you can't socialize, at least here anyways.
Well, I think, it's the same thing in the States. We kind of, we were in a good place with COVID, and then we got to a bad place.
Yeah, exactly. So like there's not much else to do besides like really going on the internet, playing some video games, exercise, of course.
Yeah.
That's why it's a good time to be posting,
do a podcast,
putting out your music.
You have a lot of time to create your stuff and really put all your energy into it, because there's nothing else distracting you. Like, you know, this is like one of the main things that, well, the one things that keeps time going by so fast. I even forget that we're in COVID because I'm so immersed in this project, and, you know, it just makes me so happy just to create, and just, it's just such a beautiful experience. And that's why, like, it's just, it also gives a chance to people during COVID, if they have this kind of leniency in themselves in order to create music, then they can start their own project, because they have all the time in the world to do these different kind of musical projects.
Well, I think that's what's great. What I found is sometimes you know, some of my friends that aren't artists, they don't really understand like the creative process, right? So they're like, they don't get it. That's why I like have, because then I get to talk to other like-minded artists, you know, because I think when you're a creative person, you take the things that happen to you, you kind of like a novelist or you're like an actor, you soak it in, and then you are able to create art from your experience. And you take stuff that you subconsciously absorbed and consciously absorb and turn it into work. And other people that can't do that, they don't understand it, right? They might appreciate it, but they don't understand how you can do it. But it's cool to talk to people that actually know what that's like. And that's why I actually do the podcast. So, because then I can actually talk to like-minded individuals. I mean, I've talked to poets and actors and musicians. They're all kind of coming from the same place.
That's the thing. You get to do things that you've never really thought of doing. And like, sometimes people didn't have time before because they're so busy with their day-to-day life. Now people work from home, and you have more time at home, and you're more rested, and all that rest gives you more creative energy. And you can use that in these kind of outlets, whether it be musical or painting or whatever it may be. You're not as tired anymore. Some people can't work, and yes, like that's very unfortunate. But also, like, some people are like, if you still have a chance to get paid by the government, but you have to stay at home, then at least you could use that time to do things that you've always wanted to do that you've never done before. And music is one of these things.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I'm lucky that my day job is I'm an IT guy, right? So when this happened, we used to be able to work remotely anyway, and they just said, well, just stay home. And so then what was cool is I used to have to fly out. I used to have to do all these 2 hour, 4 hour commutes, and now I don't have to do that. So then all that time I spent commuting, I can put into my art. And so to me, it was great. It's like now I got 4 hours in a day that instead of commuting, I can actually write a song or do a podcast. And so that to me, it was like, it's actually been a good time for me, which I know a lot of the people have trouble, but like I've been able to take advantage of it in a way that maybe other people is like a negative for them. But for me, it's been a positive situation. I get to talk to people like you.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a really great positive. And that's the thing. Like I've realized that, to be honest, like aside from not being able to see music performances, which I really enjoyed as well before COVID, like I was telling Corrina, actually, it doesn't feel like there's COVID happening because I don't know, I'm enjoying myself a lot, and it doesn't feel like for me much has changed. I mean, now it's more severe, but like this summer, like to me, I was having so much fun doing this project, and so it's just how
Yeah.
the COVID does have, it's a blessing in disguise for many things.
Well, I think it makes people realize how important family is, how important their friends are.
Precisely.
Yeah, I think when something bad happens like this, it's kind of like a 9/11 that didn't go away. It keeps on building up. Like every day you get like 9/11 numbers, and it's like, and then what happens is kind of crazy. It's like when 9/11 happens on one day, that's like everybody can understand that. But when it's happening every day, yeah,
Constantly.
people don't get it. Like in the U.S., we're hitting like 9/11 numbers like every day, and and people just get numb to it. Um, but I think it's to also be very mindful of like you should try not to get numb to it, and you should be aware of it, and you should like take it and understand it, and don't get freaked out by it, but you just be aware of it and don't lose that, because I think it's important to your creative process to be kind of aware, and don't get totally like not able to do anything because of it, but don't forget about it.
Well, yeah, be careful, be respectful, wear your mask, everything like that. But there's still like, don't despair because it will end, and there are positives to it,
Yeah,
like
I think people, like we said,
well, you appreciate your families more as well, and your friends and people that you love, because that's another thing I was thinking about the other day. It was like, well, the one beautiful thing about COVID is that it reminds people of their mortality, because often people like put it off, and when you have a threat like this, which can affect anyone, it reminds you like, be grateful for who you have in your life and what you get to do. And
when people get so caught, people are so caught up in the rat race. Like I said, I used to have to jump on planes and jump in cabs, and I'm gone from my family all the time, right? And only see them on the weekend. And you take people for granted, and you're doing this and doing that, and now you've got all this time, and you got to learn how to communicate. You can't be as abrupt, you can't be as rude as maybe you were, because it's like, well, we got to go here, I go there. So I think it's like it's a kind of a lesson time for people, and everybody can kind of learn their lesson for the day and take it and figure it out. But yeah, I'm glad I had this conversation with you guys. What's the target date for your single?
I would say actually, I would say in about a month, actually, or 3 weeks, a month. We don't have like a precise date, but definitely very, very soon. I would say maybe a month, two at most.
Yeah, if you guys get the pre-save up, or you let me know when it's coming, we could schedule.
Oh, definitely.
We could definitely
for
schedule
sure,
like
100%. 100%.
We can schedule like a release party show.
Really? No way. I'll definitely tell Corrina that.
Yeah. So
that would be really good, actually.
Yeah.
He's, like saying like he wants to do a release party when we like a show for when we release our single.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And like he was asking like, because Corrina just went to the ladies' room real quick. Just like what when around we think we're going to release our single? And I said maybe in about 2 months at most.
Yeah, latest I think like end February. We're hoping.
Yeah, as soon as you got it firmed up and you know it, we can schedule so that, you know, once it's out, you know, we can have it so we can actually, you know, attach it to the episode and then talk about it. But the way we attach it, like we're actually part of Spotify. We're actually a Spotify company, so we can actually attach the link, and then when we, you know, highlight it, it'll link to it, and so we can push it as part of the podcast, and it'll actually, you know, get pushed there. We can also push it on other platforms, but because we're on Spotify, we push it there first, and then we can push it other places too. But
awesome, thank you.
That's we really appreciate that. That's really awesome. Like that would be really great.
Well, that's the whole point of what we like to do, because, you know, like I said, I'm a musician myself, and I created this podcast because a couple of years ago there was some people out there, they were charging people like $100 to be on a podcast, and I said, with like, you know, I'm a musician, I just want to talk to other musicians, and I'll just do it for free. And then I ended up, you know, linking up with these guys, and I end up getting paid from my plays. So I get like money coming from how many plays happens. So I don't have to charge anybody. And so then it's like, you know, what I felt is other podcasts were talking to people for like 15 minutes. And I felt like I wanted to be able to do a free form kind of behind the music type of thing where people got to really know the band. And because as a musician, I love album biographies and documentaries about bands.
Me too. I love those.
Yeah, and I said, you know, why don't I get modern bands, you know, current bands, that opportunity to be able to give that to their fans, you know, as a way for them to know the band.
It's really great what you're doing. I find, like, I don't know what it is, but, you know, paying bars to like play there, and they're still like getting all the money from the people we bring, and they're buying alcohol. Like, I don't know. I feel like music is not maybe not appreciated as much as it should be these days, and always have to pay for like everything you do. Like some bars in Montreal cost like $300 for you to play the night, and like
I like it when the
bring
band,
like 50 people.
I like it when the
like
bar when the bar plays me. I kind of like I always do shows when they're gonna pay me. Like when I first started, when I first started,
that's the thing.
Like, when I first started, I had to play that game. But then I got to the point where I could actually do it. But you know, when you get into it, that's what you have to do. But
exactly, it's at first, you know, you start off low and you have to just invest, and that's the thing. Like it's something. But like she was saying, it's like it's nice that, you know, you kind of give this free access for people, even people that are non-musicians, you know, most likely listen to your podcast, and they just want to know more about bands and the whole creative process. And it's really, really great, like, because it reminds me of me when I sometimes, like you're saying, you watch like classic albums. I would watch, you know, E! True Hollywood Story, or about my favorite musicians, or even like, you know, how they actually made the recording process. And that's like really great. And that's really what you're getting at, which is very good.
Well,
and,
you
like,
know,
it should be a free thing that people appreciate the musician for, and see how much work that a musician goes through, and you give people a chance to view that. And maybe people actually, after listening to your show, they realize, hey, I should support this artist, I should pay, because, you know, they're working their heart and soul and putting into something. And it's a lot of work. People don't realize how much work goes into a recording process, practicing, you know, composing, making harmonies match, all of these different little things. It's a lot of work, but obviously, you know, we love it. But people, you know, you give a chance for people to realize that, and to actually support the artists in what they're doing, to share their love with the world, and to share their fingerprints and their own unique sound waves that will never be replicated by anyone else out to the world, which is a very beautiful thing.
Well, the other thing we do is, like, once you get out there and you have like your Spotify profile, a lot of the Spotify profiles and SoundCloud profiles actually have a place where people can donate to the band. And we always encourage anybody who likes a band, right? We always tell them, you know, go to iTunes and actually buy the record. Go to Amazon and buy the record.
Yeah, of
don't
course.
just
It's
stream
important
it.
to,
Yeah, go to the band's website and buy it. You buy
because
their
that's the thing. There's no more like it's not like even just in the 90s, there was albums and people would go to HMV or like, music stores and buy the album. Right now, the only way a person can make money is by touring
yeah
if you're a musician, or merchandise. And, Spotify, it's kind of like it's a beautiful form of easy access for people to access music, but at the same time, it does kind of making profit out of music much harder,
yeah
because people just listen to it for free instead of
yeah.
actually buying things from it, or actually buying an album, or buying, it's kind of like today's Napster,
Well,
essentially, in
that's
a
what I try
way,
to get people
I
to understand.
find.
Like, if you're willing to buy an Xbox game for $60 or $70, and you
That's
buy
the
a
thing.
PlayStation
Yeah.
5 game for $60, or you give a YouTuber
Mhm.
like Dashy, not that, I mean, I love Dashy, but if you go and give him a $20 tip, you can't go on Amazon and buy that the download. It costs $9.
Yeah. 100%. I totally agree with you. And that's what's a bit frustrating, actually, because it's like you're going to spend something, you're going to spend so much money on something that's not very, sorry to say the word, but I guess it's the truth, something that's not very useful. Let's say, like, maybe a video game, in comparison to like listening to a piece of music. You listen to it and it brings feelings in you that the musician was trying to create. And also, you kind of, it's almost like a biography. Like, what does this song mean? Oh, I could relate to that. And also, you can learn
Well,
from
the
it. People are
music
like, oh, maybe I
triggers
could.
feelings. You get a
It triggers feelings, but not only that,
yeah. I
inspiration
mean,
as well. Inspiration, and it creates this whole node of connection, of a domino effect of being inspired and stuff like that.
I mean, I listen to a Karen. I get back to like 74. I brought when I heard Close to You in like 74 or 73, and where I was, right? And that's what music does
Hmm.
versus a video game, and that to me is like worth a lot. But some people today, after the Napster age, maybe that's not as worth as much to them. But this whole show is also, I always try to tell people, like, support the band's merch, go to their website, do everything. If you
Precisely,
love a
100%.
if you
I
love a
totally agree.
band, support the band. And so, don't just add them to your playlist. If you love them, actually do what's necessary. Treat them like you would treat a YouTuber and give them a tip. You know,
Exactly. I feel like it's just upside down now today. It's like you have people, it's like on YouTube stars are basically not doing anything creative or productive. It's just because they're saying something funny or whatever, and then
yeah. I
they're.
mean, it's a different world. My daughter is kind of into that, and I have a hard time understanding it because I come from a different generation, and she'll watch all these YouTubers, and like I'm trying to understand it because she's like 20, and but it's like I have time to understand, like, why would you pay to see these guys? One time she actually went to pay to see a bunch of YouTubers at a convention. And I'm like, why would you go see that instead of seeing a rock show? I couldn't get it.
Mhm.
I didn't understand it. but
No, I totally agree, and that's the thing. Like, I'm like you. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I'm very old fashioned. Like, I'm 30 years old, but like I'm very old fashioned. There's still some things I just don't get with the way things are. Like why is it that music is a form of art that should be appreciated? Not everyone can do it, and it's not something, and it's so unique. When you listen to like a piece of
mhm.
music, it'll never be recreated again. It's so genuine, and it's so, because everyone's so different. Everyone has a different soul, and I guess I also view it in kind of a spiritual way, because I am a
Mhm.
spiritual person, and it's a fingerprint of your soul. It's like the blueprint of who you are, basically, in a piece of
Yeah,
music, or what
totally. I
experience you're
totally
having.
get it. I mean, the music I love always is kind of wrought with the passion of the artist. From if I listen to some really heartbreak albums like Neil Young's Tonight, Tonight's the Night came out of the fact that he had a bunch of people in his
Hmm.
life died of drug overdoses, right? And he relayed it in an album, and it's very raw and painful, right? And it's like a story, and maybe that's too depressing for kids today, but it's like, it is an important to convey this kind and it wasn't just about, you know, oh, I love a girl, I love this woman, or I love my brother, whatever. He basically conveyed the loss of somebody to addiction in a whole record. And that's the kind of stuff that an artist can be, like a writer or a filmmaker, you know. And
exactly, and that's a beautiful thing, because people that listen to it could actually relate to it. Like, I don't know, me, like when I go through heartbreak, there's always that one artist that I go to, and I feel like he could to relate so much to what I'm feeling right now. And it's just you it's like a friend that you could listen to.
And that's like, yeah,
Like a friend that's there, like, and it helps you go through things, which is really nice as well. Like, you know, it's just,
well, we're on the same page, and I'm glad. I'm really looking forward in the next month to have you guys back on, and we'll put, you know, we're going to put this episode out. We are actually on 11 podcast platforms, including Spotify
awesome.
podcast, Apple podcast.
Really?
Yeah,
And Apple Podcasts.
Overcast, Radio Public. What happens is once I publish this, it automatically publishes to 11 platforms, and we will send you the link to the Apple and the Spotify and the Anchor FM. It will be on Radio Public and Overcast and a bunch of other ones. And
wow, that's really awesome. We really appreciate that, and we'll definitely put it on our page as well and mention.
yeah, we're gonna run a story on we'll run a story
it.
on our Instagram that will actually link right to the Spotify, and you can kind of like it and push it and do whatever you want. We'll send you the links.
Absolutely.
We actually run a blog page on our GoDaddy site. We'll actually have a little article page that will have like a picture of you. But normally, if you had like your album out, it would link to it. But we'll link it back to your Instagram.
No way. Okay, that's
so we'll
really
do that.
good
But once
know.
your record comes out, we'll go update that page and link it to your Spotify or Apple or your website.
Really?
If you have a website, if you sell a CD or vinyl, we can link to that. So yeah, so we just like to push music. We push our music. We push everybody's music. But yeah, we're glad that we had you on the line, and we look forward again to your new music. And be safe and have a good holiday season.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. This will be out in about an hour, and we'll send you the link.
Oh,
We'll send you the
awesome.
links. I just got to edit it and link the segments together because it saved what we did before, and I just have to queue it up and stuff. But yeah, it'll be good. I'll talk.
All right.
Thank you.
It was really nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you did. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank your friend. Yeah, if you know other bands around you that need, you know, let them know they can get contact me through my Instagram.
All right. All right,
Okay.
cool. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Huh? We really appreciate it.
Night.
All right. Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.